I grew up in a home where silence was my closest companion. It wasn't the peaceful kind of silence, the kind that comforts you after a long day. No, it was the heavy kind. The silence that presses against your chest and reminds you, without words, that you don't belong. My name is Sarah, and for as long as I can remember, I was the forgotten one in my own family. While I faded into the background, my sister Emily shone like the center of the universe. She was everything my parents ever wanted. Brilliant, beautiful, adored. And every ounce of love, every word of encouragement, every proud glance was reserved only for her. I never heard my name spoken with pride. Not once. If it was spoken at all, it was usually in comparison. Why can't you be more like Emily? That was the unspoken question that haunted me in every room, every holiday, every moment of my life. My parents' favoritism wasn't subtle, it was paraded. At family gatherings, my father would stand tall, his arm proudly around Emily's shoulder, boasting about her achievements while relatives clapped and cheered. I would stand off to the side, quiet, trying to disappear into the wallpaper. It was safer that way. The less I was seen, the less I was reminded of what I lacked. But inside, the sting only grew sharper each year. Watching her receive the applause I longed for. Watching her be showered with gifts I could never dream of having. Watching my parents look at her with a tenderness I could never earn. It was as if life itself was divided into two columns. Emily's, overflowing with everything I ever wanted, and mine, filled with nothing but the echo of neglect. When Emily aced her classes, there were parties thrown in her honor. When I scraped by, my parents barely acknowledged I existed. When she won awards, they framed them on the walls for everyone to see. My milestones, however small, were quickly forgotten, erased as though they never happened. And then came the gifts, the ones that broke me in ways I never admitted aloud. While I was still figuring out how to pay for my own textbooks, Emily was handed keys to a brand new car. While I sat in my dimly lit room, convincing myself that my dreams still mattered, she was moving into a mansion that my parents proudly signed over to her. And when I struggled to even imagine a future, they handed her millions. Yes, millions, without hesitation. Every new gift they gave her was another reminder of how little I meant to them. Another nail sealing the coffin of the person I could have been, had I ever been given the chance. But here's what may shock you. Through all of it, I never fought back. I sat quietly. I stayed silent. I swallowed the anger and buried the grief. Because deep down, I believed what they believed, that I was unworthy. I told myself that maybe I deserved nothing. Maybe I was meant to live in the shadows, while Emily basked in the light. But life has a way of flipping the script when you least expect it. Because on the day I finally accepted that I would always be the forgotten one, a stranger stepped forward. He pressed an envelope into my hand, and with it, he shattered everything I thought I knew about my life. I didn't know it then, but that single moment, the feel of that letter against my skin, was the beginning of everything. And before I continue this story, I want to ask you something. If you've ever felt invisible, overlooked, or pushed aside, stay with me until the end. Because what happened next changed my life forever. And if you're new here, don't forget to subscribe and hit the like button, so you'll never miss stories like this one. Growing up, my family looked perfectly ordinary from the outside. We lived in a modest home in a quiet American neighborhood where kids rode their bikes down the street in summer, and everyone showed up for the 4th of July parade. To neighbors, we probably looked like the picture of a happy middle-class family. But appearances can hide so much. Inside those walls, life was a stage play, and there were only two roles, the star and the shadow. Emily was the star. I was the shadow. My parents never tried to hide their bias. If anything, they wore it proudly. Emily was their gifted one, their miracle child. They praised her in ways that made her glow even brighter, and each time they did, I shrank a little more into myself. I can still remember the day of Emily's spelling bee. She stood tall on that stage, spelling every word with confidence. When she won, the crowd roared, my parents leapt to their feet, and she was swept into a sea of hugs and photographs. I was there too, sitting quietly in the back. My heart longed for even a glance from my parents, a word of recognition, but it never came. That moment became the rhythm of my life. Emily winning, Emily shining, Emily celebrated, and me, always in the shadows, always invisible. In high school, the divide grew even sharper. On the day Emily turned 16, my parents surprised her with a brand new car. Shiny, red, and wrapped with a bow. I can still see her laughter echoing through the driveway as neighbors stopped to admire it. I, meanwhile, caught the bus every morning, rain or shine, clutching my backpack and keeping my head down. When the bus pulled away, I watched Emily glide past in her car, like a queen among her subjects. And me? I sat quietly in the back. Graduation should have been a milestone for both of us. Emily's name was called. An entire auditorium erupted in cheers. She had earned scholarships to prestigious universities, and my parents beamed as they waved proudly from the stands. My name was called too. I walked across the stage, took my diploma, and looked out into the crowd, only to see my parents still on their feet, still clapping for Emily, as if I hadn't even existed. My own small triumph, a piece of artwork that had been chosen for a local exhibition, went unnoticed, dismissed as a hobby unworthy of mention. The message was clear. Emily was the achiever. I was the disappointment. It wasn't just the big moments, either. It was in the little things, too. At family dinners, every question was about Emily, her grades, her friends, her future. My seat at the table felt more like an afterthought, a chair someone had pulled up at the last minute. And while my parents' eyes sparkled with pride when they looked at her, their gaze slid right past me as though I weren't even there. That's the thing about being invisible. After a while, you start to believe you deserve it. You convince yourself that maybe silence is safer. Maybe the shadows are where you belong. But deep inside, I carried a quiet ache. I wanted so badly to be seen, to be valued, to be loved in the same way Emily was. And yet, no matter how hard I tried, no matter what little victories I had, it was never enough. Year after year, Emily's world grew bigger. New car, new opportunities, new recognition, while mine stayed small. And so I did what I always did. I sat quietly in the back. As Emily's star rose higher, mine all but disappeared. Her acceptance letter to an Ivy League school arrived with cheers and champagne, as though she had just won the lottery. My parents threw a party in her honor, inviting family, neighbors, even coworkers to celebrate. The living room was filled with laughter, the air heavy with the smell of expensive catering, the clinking of glasses echoing against the walls. I was there too, tucked into a corner of the room, watching from a distance. Nobody asked me about my life, my plans, or my dreams. Every conversation circled back to Emily, her brilliance, her future. And once again, I sat quietly in the back. Then came the gifts. A Tesla gleaming in the driveway, ribbon tied perfectly across the hood. Designer clothes, handbags, jewelry. Whatever Emily desired seemed to appear effortlessly in her hands. Each gift was wrapped not just in shiny paper, but in the reminder that she was everything I wasn't. Family dinners turned into performances. My father would raise his glass, his voice booming, praising Emily for her accomplishments. Relatives would applaud, their eyes glowing with admiration. And when the spotlight dimmed, no one noticed me sitting silently at the far end of the table, staring at the untouched food on my plate. I tried to carve a space for myself. I picked up small jobs, poured my heart into projects, even created artwork that began to gain recognition online. But when I showed my parents, they brushed it off as a hobby. They never once asked what it meant to me. They never once saw me. It all came to a head on Emily's 21st birthday. The house was packed with guests, the music loud, the decorations extravagant. My parents stood in front of everyone and announced their gift. They were signing over the deed to a beach house in Florida, an inheritance handed over early because Emily deserved it. The crowd erupted in applause. Emily's smile stretched wide as she accepted the papers, basking in the glow of admiration. And me? I stood in the back, my heart pounding, my face burning, wondering how it felt to be given everything I ever wanted. But the cruelty didn't end there. Not long after, there was a family dinner unlike any other. The air was thick with tension, though at the time I didn't know why. My parents sat at the head of the table, Emily by their side, glowing as always. Then, in front of everyone, relatives, family friends, even neighbors they'd invited, they announced their decision. Emily would inherit everything. The family company, the cars, the mansion, the accounts. And me? Nothing. They didn't soften the blow. They didn't disguise it. They looked out across the room and declared that I wasn't capable, that I was the weak one, the slow one, that I didn't deserve a thing. Laughter rippled through parts of the crowd, nervous and uncomfortable. Others shifted in their seats, unsure of what to do. And me? I sat quietly, swallowing the humiliation, every word pressing deeper into my chest like a blade. It was in that moment, surrounded by people who now knew the truth my parents had been whispering for years, that I felt the full weight of my invisibility. I wasn't just ignored in private anymore. I was erased in public. And so I ask you, what would you have done if you were in my seat that day? Would you have stood up and shouted? Would you have fought for your worth? Or would you have done what I did? Sat quietly in the back, holding back the tears, waiting for the moment to pass. Let me know in the comments, because I'll be reading every single one. I didn't know it then, but that dinner was not just a humiliation. It was a stage being set, because when the moment of truth arrived, everything I thought I knew about myself and about my family was about to shatter. The weeks after that humiliating dinner blurred together. I moved through life in silence, numb to the laughter and the celebrations that filled the mansion halls. My parents, beaming with pride, prepared Emily for the future that was already being handed to her. Then, one afternoon, an invitation arrived. Heavy cardstock, embossed with gold lettering. A formal reading, scheduled after a distant relative's passing. At first, I thought little of it. Emily was already the heir to everything that mattered. What could possibly be left for me? The day of the will reading felt colder than it should have been. I remember staring out the car window as Emily adjusted her diamond earrings in the reflection of the glass. My parents kept talking about her future, the business, the mansion, the endless opportunities. Not once did my name slip into the conversation. By the time we stepped into the attorney's office, I had already convinced myself. This day has nothing to do with me. The mahogany-paneled room, filled with murmurs of relatives I barely knew. They greeted Emily with warm hugs, congratulatory smiles, and promises of celebration dinners. Me, a nod, if anything at all. I walked to the back row, as invisible as ever. The attorney began. One by one, the announcements spilled like confetti meant only for my sister. The sports cars, the Florida beach house, the company shares. Each item read aloud wasn't just an inheritance. It was a reminder of how much I didn't matter. I sat perfectly still, my fingers digging crescents into my palms beneath the table. And then, just as the reading seemed finished, something unusual happened. The attorney paused, shuffled papers, cleared his throat. For a fleeting second, I saw confusion cross his face. He pulled out a sealed document, separate from the pile. But before he could speak, my father leaned forward, his voice sharp and commanding. "That's not necessary. Skip it." The room went silent. The attorney hesitated, then pressed the folder flat against the desk. Emily's smile flickered just for a second. And me? My stomach dropped. What could possibly be in that folder? The reading continued, but my mind stayed locked on the document that had been silenced. When it ended, relatives began to stand, chatter filling the air. That's when I noticed him, an older man, seated in the shadows at the far corner of the room. His suit was worn, but his posture straight, deliberate. Unlike everyone else, he hadn't clapped for Emily. He hadn't nodded along with the announcements. He had just watched, and the entire time his eyes never left me. At first, I thought he might be confused, mistaking me for someone else. But no, his gaze was intentional, steady, piercing. It made my pulse race, and then the unexpected. As people began to leave, he rose slowly and walked directly toward me. The crowd parted around him without realizing it, conversations faltering as if some unspoken gravity pulled their attention. He stopped beside me. Without a word, he slipped a heavy envelope into my hand. The texture was thick, old, its seal unbroken. He leaned close enough that only I could hear. "Now," he whispered, his voice gravelly but certain, "it is your turn." Before I could respond, he turned and walked away, disappearing into the departing crowd. My fingers tightened around the envelope. My heart pounded. But just as I began to break the seal, my mother's hand clamped down on my wrist. Her eyes, cold and sharp, bore into mine. "Don't," she hissed. "That's not for you." And for the first time, I saw fear in her expression. Not anger, not disappointment. Fear. I froze. Around us, Emily laughed with relatives, showing off her new car keys, oblivious. But my mother's grip told a different story. She knew exactly what was inside this envelope, and she didn't want me to see it. I slipped it into my coat pocket when she wasn't looking. I didn't dare open it there, not under her gaze, not with everyone watching. That night, in my room, I held the envelope under the dim glow of a bedside lamp. My breath caught as I carefully peeled away the seal. Inside, I expected money, or maybe a letter of pity. But it wasn't either of those things. It was a map. Not just any map, but one marked with a location I knew all too well. My grandfather's abandoned workshop on the outskirts of town. A place I hadn't visited since childhood, long since locked up after his passing. And scribbled across the bottom in shaky handwriting were the words, "Everything you need is here, but come alone." My hands trembled. My grandfather? Why would he leave me this? Why hide it from everyone else? I wanted answers, but something inside whispered that those answers wouldn't be simple. And here's where the story twists, because what I discovered at that workshop was not just an inheritance. It was a secret my family had spent years burying. But before I take you there, let me ask you something. Have you ever stumbled on a secret your family never wanted you to know? A truth they worked desperately to hide? Tell me in the comments, because I know I'm not the only one who's ever felt the chill of uncovering something forbidden. That envelope wasn't the end of my story. It was the beginning of something much bigger. That night, long after the will reading, I found myself standing in front of my grandfather's workshop. The air was damp, the moon casting long shadows across the gravel path. I hadn't been here since I was a child, back when my grandfather's hands were always stained with ink and oil, when he told me stories about perseverance and reminded me that silence could be a kind of strength. The padlock on the door was old, rusted. To my surprise, the key was taped to the back of the envelope. My fingers shook as I slid it into place, the metal clicking louder than it should have in the night. Inside, the air smelled of dust and memory. The shelves were lined with boxes, some collapsing under the weight of years. My flashlight cut across the room, catching on tarps, faded photographs, stacks of papers. I almost turned back, but then I saw it. On the workbench, under a sheet of cracked leather, was a wooden chest. My grandfather's initials were carved into the lid. Inside were documents, dozens of them, college recommendation letters I had never seen, receipts from art auctions where my pieces, the ones my parents dismissed as hobbies, had sold anonymously for thousands, bank slips showing deposits into an account under my name, and then at the very bottom, a notarized letter addressed to me. My hands trembled as I unfolded it. My dearest Sarah, you have been overlooked but not unseen. Your strength is quiet, but it is strength all the same. I built this legacy for you, knowing they would try to bury it. If you are reading this, it means the time has come. Do not be afraid. The truth is on your side. Tears blurred my vision. For the first time in my life, I felt seen. Not just as Emily's shadow, not as the daughter dismissed, but as someone worthy. But I also felt a shiver of fear. If my grandfather knew, they'd try to bury the truth. Then my parents were hiding more than I realized. I left the workshop with the chest cradled in my arms. The next morning, I returned to the attorney's office. My parents were already there, smug and satisfied, Emily flipping through magazines like she owned the place. I walked in quietly, chest in hand. Their smiles faltered. The attorney looked startled when I placed the documents on his desk. His brow furrowed as he flipped through them, his lips tightening. "These," he finally said, "change everything." My mother's face drained of color. My father shifted uncomfortably in his chair. Emily sat up straighter, her voice sharp and cracking. "That's fake. It has to be fake." But the attorney shook his head. "These were signed, notarized, and recorded. The legal heir is not Emily. It's Sarah." The room erupted. Emily's voice rose, shrill and furious. My parents leaned forward, demanding explanations. But I sat perfectly still, the same way I always had, only this time with a quiet power they couldn't touch. For years I had been invisible. Now I was undeniable. I looked at Emily. My voice was calm, steady, stronger than I'd ever heard it. "For so long, you all treated me like I was nothing. But my grandfather saw me. And today the world will too." The silence that followed was heavier than any humiliation I had ever endured. And yet, even as victory settled into my chest, I couldn't shake one thought. If my parents went to such lengths to hide this, what else were they hiding? Because I would soon learn. The workshop held another secret, one even Emily wasn't prepared for. But before I take you there, let me pause. Have you ever had someone tell you that you'd never be enough, only to one day prove them wrong? If you have, you know exactly how this moment felt for me. Drop a comment and share your story. I'd love to know how many of us have turned silence into strength. That day, in that office, I thought the battle was over. But it wasn't. It was just beginning. For a few moments in that attorney's office, I thought it was finished. The documents were real. The proof undeniable. The company, the assets, the trust fund, all tied to me, not Emily. I had finally stepped out of the shadows. But shadows, I would soon learn, do not disappear so easily. Emily's chair screeched as she stood, her face red, tears brimming but never falling. "This isn't fair," she shouted. "She doesn't deserve it. She's always been the failure, the weak one. Everyone knows it." My parents didn't stop her. They didn't scold her. Instead, they leaned toward me. Their voices, suddenly soft, almost sweet. "Sarah," my mother said, placing a hand over mine. "We may have been harsh in the past, but this changes everything. We want to be close again. We want to make it up to you." I looked at her hand, warm, steady. But I knew the truth. It wasn't love. It was fear. My father chimed in, his tone measured, practiced. "We could guide you, help you manage everything. It's a lot for one person to handle. You wouldn't want to make mistakes." I almost laughed. For years, they told me I wasn't capable. And now, when everything was finally mine, they wanted to guide me. But the strangest moment came next. The attorney, who had been silent through their pleading, cleared his throat. "There is one more clause," he said carefully, adjusting his glasses. The room froze. He pulled a smaller envelope from the bottom of the folder, sealed in red wax, older than the rest. His hands shook slightly as he broke it open. "This clause," he said, "was added in the final weeks of your grandfather's life. It stipulates that while Sarah is the heir, she must complete a final task before full control is transferred. Failure to do so means everything reverts back to Emily." My breath caught. Emily gasped, her lips curling into a cruel smile. "What task?" I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. The attorney looked down at the page. It states that Sarah must uncover and present the hidden legacy project her grandfather began in secret. No details are provided, only that the truth of her inheritance lies not in wealth, but in understanding his unfinished work. Emily's smile widened. You'll never figure it out. You never figure out anything. The weight of the room pressed in on me. A part of me wanted to crumble, to fall back into silence, to let their words dictate my fate. But another part, the part my grandfather believed in, refused. I remembered his letter. The truth is on your side. I looked directly at Emily, then at my parents, their false sympathy now cracking at the edges. I will find it, I said. My voice didn't shake. And when I do, there won't be anything left for you to hide behind. For the first time, Emily looked uncertain. My parents' faces paled. But deep down I knew this wasn't over. This was only the beginning of a larger battle. And that clause, hidden until the very end, wasn't just a test. It was a warning. Because what my grandfather left behind wasn't just an inheritance. It was a secret powerful enough to tear my family apart forever. The drive home after the will reading was silent. Emily's face burned with rage, my parents' whispers sharp and clipped, but no one dared speak to me directly. I sat in the back seat, envelope and documents pressed tightly against my chest, knowing life as I knew it was gone forever. For the first time in years, I wasn't invisible. I was undeniable, and yet the victory felt fragile. That night, I sat in my room, staring at the words of my grandfather's letter again and again. The truth is on your side. But which truth? The inheritance? The clause about the unfinished project? Or the truth about who my family really was? The days that followed blurred together. Strangers called, congratulating me. Family friends reached out, suddenly remembering I existed. My parents tried to hover, cloaking their control in kindness. Emily, though, barely looked at me. When she did, her eyes carried something I'd never seen before. Not just jealousy, but calculation. And then it came. A letter delivered by courier. Thick, stamped with legal seals. I tore it open, my stomach twisting. It was a notice. Emily had filed an injunction. She was challenging the inheritance, claiming fraud, claiming manipulation, claiming me. My hands shook as I read the pages. I knew this wasn't just about money. This was about erasing me all over again. But my grandfather's clause echoed in my mind. Unfinished project, the truth lies there. It hit me then. Emily's lawsuit wasn't just an attack. It was a distraction, a way to keep me from finding what my grandfather had hidden. And that's when I knew. If I wanted to keep what he left me, if I wanted to protect myself, I had to solve his mystery first. The inheritance wasn't the end. It was only the beginning. I looked out my window that night at the dark horizon, my reflection staring back at me. For the first time, I wasn't afraid of Emily's schemes or my parents' manipulation, because the real battle wasn't in the courtroom. It was in the truth my grandfather had left buried, and I would find it. But here's where I need you. Should I tell you what happened when I went back to the workshop to uncover his unfinished project? Because what I found there changed everything, not just for me, but for my entire family. If you want part 2, let me know in the comments right now. And don't just comment, hit subscribe and turn on notifications, because when I drop the next chapter, you won't want to miss it. This wasn't just a story about inheritance. This was a story about legacy, about betrayal, and about the kind of truth that refuses to stay buried. And the next chapter is only just beginning.